Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe, and do consider supporting the channel via PayPal or Patreon. You'll find the links in the video description. This game is a fascinating battle between two beautiful bishops and two knights. One might even say octopus knights. Really intriguing stuff. So this is played in the Airthings Masters, the first of the Champions Chess Tour online events in 2022. And Alexandra Kosteniuk is playing white, Erik Hansen playing black. Now Kosteniuk to this moment had scored 13 losses. 16 player, 15 round tournament, 13 losses. That is really tough. Her opponent Erik Hansen, well, he's perhaps more well known as a chess streamer these days. He's one of the chess bras. But obviously has had a lot of practice in playing online, and he was doing really well in the tournament. So what would happen here? Could Kosteniuk avoid a complete wipeout with just 2 games to go? So it starts out as, well, a kind of gioco piano, but here Kosteniuk plays c3 instead of castling or d3, and then d4, and we're back in, well, this is a very, very old line. And after this exchange, bishop b4 check. Well, this is quite well known as being basically just equal. So here, this is the main line. After this, it's a pretty dry position. In fact, let me go into a little bit of detail. This repetition is very common in top level chess for players that just want to make a short draw and so on. But instead of the normal bishop d2, there's also this crazy gambit with knight c3, but anyway, that's another story. But knight d2 played by Kosteniuk, and this is a very interesting gambit actually that's come to prominence well, reasonably recently, the last few years. If knight takes pawn, then white pushes this knight around and gets compensation. I think I'm gonna do a video on this for my patrons actually in my monthly opening survey, because I think it's a really interesting gambit. Instead of taking the pawn, Hansen plays very pragmatically with pawn to d5. I think this is very sensible. So, you know, you don't lose the initiative, but you play against the isolated pawn in the sense that, you know, this is an important square, d5, a good blockader, and white castles. And here Kosteniuk actually had this in an earlier round against Yesipenko and played knight e4. And I think that's quite a reasonable move. But here she went pawn to a3. And the bishop could retreat, but Hansen keeps it very simple. He just exchanges and plays bishop g4. So it's a very active way of playing. Simple development. Nice pin. And of course, there's now a direct threat to this pawn on d4. Now, I think Kosteniuk plays, I think, in the most enterprising way here. You know, if you simply go on the defensive with a move like bishop e3, it looks quite passive. I think, you know, black has very easy play in that position. But instead she plays h3. And if the bishop goes back, I'm sure she would have played g4 just to drive the bishop away. But Hansen plays very directly and in a straightforward way and exchanges. And knight b6. So he's playing just to win this pawn. So the bishop retreats. And now knight takes pawn on d4. Hits the queen. And the queen takes b7. So for the moment, it's level material. Rook b8. Now, I think it's very important that this queen comes back into reality somehow. You know, if queen takes pawn, then knight here, check, I imagine. And that just breaks up white's king side. That would be absolutely horrible. So queen e4, re-centralising the queen, important, and of course threatening checkmate. So f5. Now that queen has to be very, very careful. Queen e3, not somehow the most attractive square, you know, blocking the bishop, but you know, it does defend this one here. c5. Now that's a really important move because that knight needs support, and it is a beautiful piece. So now we have this really intriguing battle. Two bishops against two knights, you know, which is better. It's a beautiful centralized knight. Dare I say, it's almost an octopus knight actually. Available from the Teespring store. You can find the link in the video description. So, you know, it's not so easy for these bishops. Okay, that's, of course, a sensible move, giving some protection to the bishops. Knight d5, wow, those knights looking really menacing. Attacking the queen, and that's a prudent move. Just pinning the knight, and the king steps out of the pin, and queen e5 hits the knight here, which retreats to b6 but does attack the bishop, which drops back to a2. So just tucking the bishop out of the way looks very sensible. And now rook e8 attacks the queen, and the queen takes the pawn. I mean, maybe it would have been better to play knight d7 just to keep that pawn guarded and attack the queen. But anyway, rook e8 played, and queen takes c5. Now that is a big pawn to take because, of course, that knight now lacks protection. It's protected by the queen, but a pawn is just much more secure. But still, it's a very unclear position with this second knight flying in, attacking the queen, and of course opening up the b file as well. Queen d5. I mean, it's possible to take here, but queen d5 is kind of pragmatic. You know, I think Kostyuk realizes that, you know, with the exchange of queens, that kind of calms things down a bit, and with the two bishops, you know, you can hope to use that advantage. Knight takes b2. Remember, this is rapid play. 15 minutes plus 10 seconds per move, but it's very tight. You really have to go on your intuition. If you try to calculate everything, you just run out of time. Rook b1. Now queen f6. So, I mean, I think that would, an exchange of queens would calm things down, but, you know, Hansen wants to play for a win, of course. You know, he's keeping the position complex. And, you know, these knights are really dangerous. Very, very tricky position all around. Rook e1, good move. Challenging the rook here. Rook d8 hits the queen. Queen a5 moves across. That keeps protection here. And knight d3, well, that looks like an octopus. Looks like two octopuses in the position. But how strong are they? Let's have a look. So rook takes rook, rook takes rook, and queen takes a7. Attacking the rook and keeping an eye on the knight. And the rook moves across to f8. Rook e3. So the question is, how strong are these knights? Is that a true octopus? I think basically that knight on d3, it's an unstable octopus. The octopus has no rock to cling to. All is not well in the octopus's garden. That's what I think. If knight here, the queen ducks back to c5. And, you know, white is getting control. The knight came to c6, but also not a stable square. It is protected by the queen. But it's not covered by a pawn. So neither knight are particularly stable. So I think this is probably a good idea. Knight c5. Hits the queen. And then comes to e4. Now that is much more stable. So that the position of the knight has definitely improved. Rook d3 defends the bishop. Maybe bishop e1 would have been stronger, because that does support the weak point on f2, but also just removes the knight from the knight attacking it as well. But rook d3 played. I mean, that does at least activate the rook on the d file, protects the bishop. Rook b8 hits the queen, queen c7. Okay, just lurking nicely, keeps an eye on the rook, keeps an eye on the knight. Queen a1 check, looks quite scary. King h2. Of course, both players very short of time. We're on move 34, really short of time, and this is a crunch moment in the game. Lots of pieces can be taken here. And, you know, there are vulnerable pieces up here as well. You know, and the queen has come to the other end of the board. It's like black's forces are a little bit scattered now. Best move is probably to take the bishop. And here, well, what would happen? The obvious move is queen takes knight. Knight takes. Black's a piece up, but queen d6 hits lots of things. Hits the rook, hits the knight. Threatens a checkmate on the back rank. And, well, this is a kind of forced sequence, and actually it starts to burn out a bit. I mean, white, you could say, is perhaps slightly better because of that passed a pawn, but black should be all right there. After queen takes a2, in fact, my computer suggests an amazing move, bishop f4, and it's good to keep that bishop. And here black can't maintain the extra piece. And this one is a definite improvement on the other variation, because that bishop looks pretty nice targeting g7. And don't forget the a-pawn. But of course, I mean, in classical chess, bishop f4 would be a difficult move to find, let alone rapid play. So that's definitely black's best. But instead, Hansen played knight takes f2, which looks, at first glance, absolutely murderous, but he had overlooked a very nice finish. Queen takes rook check. That was the final move of the game. Hansen resigned because, of course, if knight takes queen, rook d8 is mate. So, after a very tense struggle, Alexandra Kosteniuk scored her first win in the tournament. I'm absolutely delighted for her. Tough one for Erik Hansen, actually, who, as I said, playing a really good tournament. However, all ended well for him. Remember, the top 8 players of the 16 would go through to the knockout phase, and Hansen made it through very nicely. Nepomniachtchi, Carlsen, Artemiev, Yesipenko, Hansen, Ding, Lei and Keymer all went through. Very pleased to see Vincent Keymer making it through. Aronian, Giri, Praggnanandhaa, Abdusattorov, Duda, Mamedyarov, Niemann and Kosteniuk unfortunately didn't make the cut. But anyway, I'm absolutely delighted for Alexandra Kosteniuk. She's a strong player. She's actually had, in 2021, had a fantastic year. Winning the Women's World Cup, winning the Women's World Rapids in Warsaw at the end of the year. And she did say, after winning that game, she said something like, I never knew that scoring 1 out of 15 could be such a relief. Thank you. Thank you so much for your support. Your messages meant a lot. That was on Twitter, of course. Yeah, when she said 1 out of 15, 1 win out of 15, of course, she meant. But yeah, I'm very pleased for her. She's really experienced. She's a strong player, but wow, I think it just shows how tough it is, how strong the top players in the world are, because, she's a very decent grandmaster, very experienced. Okay, I'll be reporting back at some moment on how the quarterfinals are going. Or in fact, how some of the other stages are going. But anyway, thanks for watching.